Well, I can't believe I had to actually just redo the beginning part of the stream because of how slow it was and how everything was getting at the moment. This is why I always try to pre-plan streams ahead of time before I actually do them. But yeah. Hello guys. Hi everyone. If you saw the title correctly, welcome. If you're reading the title, you know exactly what this stream is going to be doing. And for those who have not done the first stream, you should, as it provides context for this stream too. So yeah. This time, it's not going to be so fun this time. As this has suggested, we're going to go over the worst of SpongeBob. Yep, it's going to be a pretty negative stream, to put it lightly. And yeah, it's really that simple. Between the way I screwed up the intro and the way I was pretty much presenting myself, I had to take that part out in order to do a better part of the stream. Because I didn't like how it was coming out at all. So, might as well start over while I still can. But yeah. Time to go over the episodes that we're going to go over the episodes that either bored us, angered us, yeah, but we're not doing that since it's not part of our regular podcast. So what a better way to close out the month of May by going over the absolute worst of the worst of the worst. And for the record, when we do these, we're only going to talk about episodes in the main series, in the main primary series. None of the movies. So don't expect Saving Bikini Bottom to make the list. We're not counting any episodes that are part of the spin-off, and we're not counting recent episodes that try to be a part of the nostalgia base, that try to reuse the old animation, or really any style for that matter, because we're not a bunch of sponge boomers who complain about everything about this show being flat out bad. That's a terrible mindset. Like we're like we're not those kinds of people who try to use Steven Hillenburg's name just to hate on everything that comes out nowadays regarding this franchise. Because doing so is a terrible thing to do, and it's actually more disrespectful than anything Nickelodeon's doing with the franchise right now. But yeah, Exactly. I'm so sick of these people. Nickelodeon episodes of SpongeBob. Steven never wanted this. That's a lie. I'm so sick of to death about these people.
Hello.
Yo, didn't expect you to show up. I
Well,
figured I
I cut
figured
my
you would have been
hours
at
at work
work.
and now I have more time.
Oh, you were yeah, yeah. All right. So now that I just did an entire pre-intro, I might as well just get to the list right away. The list you've all been wanting to see for a while.
What up?
What up? And if you saw the title of the stream, y'all know exactly what this list is going to be doing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
SpongeBob was.
Yep. This time it's been a part two from the original list, but this time we're going to talk about the bad side of it.
Oh, jeez. The rotten pineapple.
Yep, the rotten pineapple under the sea.
We're gonna talk about the shit, the doo doo, the poopity pop.
Hey, here's a
All
fun little
right.
game. Sorry.
So yeah, and this is going to be a top 30 list. So it's going to be a long one.
Okay, it's been a while since I've seen SpongeBob, so just bear with me.
Yeah. Don't worry. Though most of these are all from before season 12. Pretty much every episode on my list is every episode before season 12.
I know there's a clip of SpongeBob where he drinks spit from a jar. That's
Yeah.
what? It's funny. Whenever I hear someone says, "Oh, at least SpongeBob doesn't have gross out humor," show them that clip.
Yeah. It's gross.
Okay.
Anyways, time for a bit of my dishonorable mentions. Trust me, they were like, yeah, all these episodes I would like to call my 60 all the way to 31. The dishonorable mentions. All right. So my dishonorable mentions are Back to the Past, Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, The Gift of Gum,
Oh,
Sports School for Grown-Ups, Pineapple Fever, I'm with Stupid, Pet or Pests, Slide Whistle Stooges, In Spongiac, A Flea in Her Dome, Tentacle Vision, House Sitting for Sandy, Fishbowl, Giant Squidward, The Card, Fungus Among Us, All That Glitters, A Friendly Game, Fun Size Friends, You Don't Know Sponge, The Clash of Triton, Squirrel Jelly, The Main Drain, Rodeo Days, Mutiny on the Krusty, Waiting, Squidward, Telepathy, Big Sister Sam, Sunbleached, and the one that almost made the number 30 spot, Are You Happy Now?
Ah.
So with all those dishonorable mentions out of the way, the real deal. Prepare yourselves. This list is going to contain the episodes that bored us, angered us, horrified us, annoyed us, or all of the above.
to go to Helga's mother. I need a smoothie.
So, in a good old-fashioned scream, let's see.
Take your time.
All right. And in a good old-fashioned scream,
The hash slinging slasher. God, I love that episode.
yep. Let's kick things off with number 30. Coming in the number 30 is quite possibly one a handful of episodes where Mr. Krabs is likable. And yeah, you're going to see season 7 quite a lot on this list as well. Because my number 30 is the Scent of Money.
Oh, jeez.
Scent of Money. Why does that's the one where he uses Gary to attract money?
Yeah. And already from that.
Right.
Yep.
You know what? I can't believe I'm saying it, but Mr. Krabs is making Lex Luthor look like Pee Wee Herman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're both voiced by Clancy Brown.
Yeah.
That's an understatement.
Anyways,
Hey.
you're going to see quite a handful of episodes where Krabs is downright horrible. And of course, why not start with the fact that he abuses Gary just to steal money?
Right.
As we have to endure that kind of premise, this episode is pretty tedious because it's just one thing that happens. But this episode also has SpongeBob at one of his more dumber lights. Like, seriously though, there were times where we see the fact that Gary is clearly suffering and doesn't want any more of this. And yet Mr. Krabs uses SpongeBob's stupidity to get to throw him off his trail, only for SpongeBob to keep falling for it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your pet is clearly suffering from facial expressions alone. That should be an indicator to get Gary out of Mr. Krabs' hands.
Oh, God.
You're gonna see quite a bit of episodes of some Gary torture, which I think it might as well just be the second episode to inspire Pet Sitter Pat, which was already a ripoff of another episode we'll be getting much, much lower on the list.
Right.
And of course, and there's the thing that people try to defend this episode why it's not so bad, because Mr. Krabs, quote, gets for his actions. I disagree. Because, spoiler alert, yes, Krabs does get hurt because of how much money in the money wave and how much he got hurt and is now badly injured in the hospital. But here's the kick to the balls. Mr. Krabs is both still alive and he's forced to have the money that he stole, like, as payment for his conditions. Like, you know what would have been a better way to end this episode? If we had Mr. Krabs pay with his own money, not the money he stole.
I swear, I don't know who's a bigger karma Houdini at this point, Mr. Burns or Mr. Krabs, or Roger for the American Dad,
or novel John Hammond. Novel John Hammond, for context, was more like Mr. Burns and Mr. Krabs.
I actually read the book. Sorry.
And this is just going to be a bit of a nitpick, but apparently this episode was revealed that Gary ended up eating a magnet, which is why he was able to protect money. Like, how is he not dead from eating all that metal? And it kind of raises a hole throughout this episode. But there were a lot of things that magnet could have attracted.
I have no idea.
So, yeah. In short, The Scent of Money is one of Mr. Krabs' worst episodes and a terrible way to start off the list. And we only have 29 more of these stinkers to go.
Oh, boy.
And kill me.
Number 29 is the first season 8 episode to make the list, and this is an episode that combines is the first of both the many torture episodes and the many Patrick's a Prick episodes you're going to be seeing a lot on this list.
Mm-hmm.
My number 29 is restraining SpongeBob.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, that's where that meme came from.
Yeah, this episode. First off, this episode is basically just Squidward tired of SpongeBob's his usual activities. Although this time he ends up getting tortured to the point where he ends up getting damn near fried alive, mind you.
Oh, that image.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, and because Squidward was fed up of all the torment he received from SpongeBob, although compared to what you're going to be seeing throughout this list, most of the torture that SpongeBob does to Squidward is mostly indirect, and actually feels more in line with his character rather than him, purposefully trying to ruin Squidward's day.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, Squidward decides to follow a restraining order. But because of that, the usual Krusty Krab activities that SpongeBob usually does are much harder to do now, because if he violates the order, he's going to go to jail. But of course, this episode only takes the worst turn once Patrick enters the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I officially lost my patience with this episode, as we're just watching Patrick harass Squidward throughout the entire episode. Like Patrick keeps saying, "Can I watch you work?" And of course, Patrick just ended up, clogging the toilet, so he has to use Squidward's clarinet to unclog it. And that's not even good to mention the episode near the climax, where for no real reason, some idiot brings a seaberry pie, in this position, dude. I brought your favorite seaberry pie. And of course, because Squidward gets tortured, this episode requires him to get a massive allergic reaction, and Patrick ends up mistaking him for a monster that wants to eat SpongeBob or hurt him. And of course, they start fighting.
Mm-hmm.
By the episode's end, Squidward decides to revoke the order against SpongeBob and decides to put another person in his place, Patrick, which makes me question, why can't you just afford another restraining order on both of them?
Because status quo is God.
Yeah. And of course, because Patrick finds out that he's part of the order, of the restraining order, he just laughs it off, and it just ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Season 8 has quite a handful of episodes of SpongeBob, where Patrick is unlikable and Squidward gets tortured, and especially in Season 8 where we have some episodes with both ends. This episode is probably one of the worst ones yet. And somehow, we only barely got to number 29. Oh boy, this is going to be a pain. We're at number 28. Number 28 is another episode where Mr. Krabs is flat out unlikable. And I have talked about a bit of this episode a few more times. My number 28 is the Krabby Chronicle.
Oh, this is the one where
this
they make that fake
episode.
news article.
All right. I'm just gonna say right now, if you want this episode is basically where Mr. Krabs decides to create a newspaper articles and tries to sell them for profit. But because he wanted to find an easier way to make money, he makes SpongeBob outright lie about people.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, it ends up ruining their lives.
Ugh.
And some of them range from Mrs. Puff, unquote, speeding. No, really, this episode has Mr. Krabs dang near speed. Because they try to make Mr. Puff look. Mind you, Mrs. Puff and Mr. Krabs have dated in this show before and after this episode.
Yeah. What the hell, Krabs?
Yeah. And of course, this episode also has Sandy's and Plankton's lives being ruined because of the lies spread about them. They think that Sandy is stupid, and they think Plankton makes chum out of, well, fish, like cannibals. As if Plankton's a cannibal.
Wait, isn't Tom fish guts? So wouldn't that mean he's telling the truth?
Not the way this episode does it, but then again, SpongeBob never understood fish physics. So
Yeah, good point.
yeah. And you would think this episode would finally end with Mr. Krabs getting his comeuppance, while Mr. Krabs getting his comeuppance and finally learning his lesson about his greed hurting people. And he does get his comeuppance by the episode's end, as they found out that because SpongeBob exposing him, the fact that Krabs was selling false information and was overworking him to no end, Mr. Krabs did all of the money he had received. But unfortunately, Krabs didn't really learn that line is wrong and was only sad that he lost all his money. So I would think he would learn, right? This episode decided to pull one wrong because in the very next second, Mr. Krabs gets the idea to use the printer to counterfeit money.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's this episode's moral. Apparently lying about people and selling false information is wrong, yet counterfeiting is okay. I'm not kidding.
Teen Titans Go would do.
This episode is just a mess to sit through. It's one of those episodes that I didn't even enjoy back when I was very young. So that should be an indicator for how bad the rest of this list is going to be. And to think that we're on, this is only the third episode on our list. It's gonna be a long fucking day. All right. Coming in at number 27 is the only episode from the infamous ratings trap called The Legends of Bikini Bottom that I'll be making on this list. Trench Billies.
Oh.
Yeah, you may be wondering, is the Splinter on the list? No. Because, spoiler, I don't even find that episode that gross. But this episode, yeah, this one's much grosser than anything the Splinter could have done for me. Seriously, the fish, the trench billies are just hideous to look at. Like seriously though. Who wants to look like seriously though? Who thought that this was a good idea. All right. Prepare to be disgusted, worms.
Ah!
Oh God.
Yeah, they have no pupils, and from the way they look like inbreds, which implies that they ended up doing a certain little term that we associate with Chris Chan.
Right.
Oh. Excuse me for a minute. I'm going to throw up.
And the rest of the episode is a painful slog to sit through, as we have to watch SpongeBob and Patrick do their activities, and it just ended up being tedious to sit through. But what really got it a spot on this list is the episode's ending. Like, as because Mr. Krabs ended up finding out that Ma Angler would be customer of the week. The Detroit police took it up and believed that Krabs was making Google eyes at her, which means Mr. Krabs ended up getting married with the anglerfish.
Yeah.
So Mr. Krabs is kind of canonically married to one of these disgusting hillbillies.
Yeah.
This episode is both boring and has some hillbilly stereotypes that I found unfunny. This episode this is probably the worst of the Legends of Bikini Bottom anthology, because of the ones, this one has the least amount to do with being an anthology. And part of, like, every other one was at least based on a mythical legend of some sort. Or this episode really has nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, probably this is the worst one, because I found this episode both boring, annoying, and gross. Yes. So yeah, and that is why Trench Billies is my number 27. Coming in at number 26. Number 26 on my list. Shuffleboarding.
I know this episode.
First off, the title of the episode is a big fat fucking lie.
Of course it is.
So this episode is about SpongeBob and Patrick going around as Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy for the little shuffleboarding contest, because, you know, the real Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are, you know, injured with their shenanigans, are in the hospital. And you would think this episode would be a pretty fun episode about a competition and shuffleboarding as we would see. Like, after all, with that kind of episode, it wouldn't be great, but it would be at least enjoyable, right?
Right. Wrong.
So what does this episode do instead? Flat out lies to you. As this episode, they just abandoned the plot halfway in, as this episode thought that it would be a great idea to have the shuffleboarding be on screen because they were the winners, and instead replace it with a brand new plot that not only has nothing to do with the original idea, but it's actually a much painful slog. And that's basically watching SpongeBob and Patrick, quote, arrest people. And trust me.
Right. And for petty reasons too. Like, you're like for throwing away a Krabby Patty because he didn't feel like eating the whole thing. Or arresting kids. Or arresting Velder.
Like, or arresting chewing too loud, or apparently not having their shoes tied. Like, almost everyone gets arrested here for the pettiest reasons, and you are forced to sit there and tolerate their lunacy then enjoying a probably decent shuffleboarding match.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even getting to mention the fact that they want to throw Man Ray in this episode in a fight scene that admittedly is the only part of the episode I actually like. Like,
Yeah,
I did laugh at the
There's
part.
actually some funny jokes. Filthy shorts attack!
And it was an episode as this guy was kind of had the funny, but I didn't do anything in a shrink Man Ray head. But he doesn't even get arrested for a justified reason because he's the villain apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this results in the Bikini Bottom jail to end up being overcrowded. And it explodes. And of course, this episode, who gets punished here?
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy.
Yeah. Like, so the Bikini Bottom, like, the disguises couldn't be any more obvious that this is not the real deal. Like, look at this.
Hey, Ray Charles could probably see for that disguise, and he's blind.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Murdock.
Like, tell me if you don't notice that these designs would obviously be more like cosplayers.
Honestly, I've seen more effort put into this grade 4 costume my teacher dressed up as SpongeBob. That had more effort than this.
Heck, Pumbaa and Pleakley have more convincing disguise than in Lilo and Stitch.
The animated one.
Yes, the animated one.
But this though, even some of their other disguises in some other episodes, somehow these look more convincing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hell.
Because at least they would get their mannerisms right. Heck, even this was more convincing than whatever the disguises were in shuffleboarding.
Yeah.
Convincing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this episode, and of course, this episode had to end. But they have so many fans while getting chased by an angry mob. So yeah, shuffleboarding is a terrible episode that not only lies to its viewers, but forces you to watch a painful slog of an episode where the ones who didn't deserve to be punished ends up getting punished, while the ones who do try to get off scot-free.
Mm-hmm.
Scorpion's right. There is no justice.
And that is why shuffleboarding is my number 26. All right. Right. My number 25 is Gone. You know, I was actually for this episode. Like the episode was actually pretty enjoyable, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We're watching SpongeBob, be alone and tries to find ways to keep himself, because everyone in Bikini Bottom's gone. I actually found the episode pretty enjoyable. When we got to Bodhi in this episode, I actually thought it took a pretty dark turn that I actually quite enjoyed. So why is it on the worst list? Simple. The ending.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they were gone. So, by the episode's end, we find out why everyone in Bikini Bottom was gone. And you want to guess why? National No SpongeBob Day.
That's something some SpongeBob haters would come up with.
Are you kidding? That has to be one of the most. That is a horrible ending. Very bad. In what world is this ever acceptable? Like, regardless of how annoying he can be, and his terrible moments will be present throughout this list. In no way did he deserve that.
Nope.
Nobody
If
deserved
Patrick
that.
went to that festival, his best friend.
Yeah, not just Patrick, but of course Sandy and Gary.
His own pet. Okay, I can understand Brian doing that with Peter because let's face it, Peter's an asshole. But Gary,
like his own pet, like, and of course Patrick just mocks him and says, "Well, we need at least one day to get them." Ah!
well,
Like that ending murdered this episode for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in high school when that episode came out. I thought that was I didn't know what to think of it. Now I think now that I'm older, it's probably one of the worst episodes I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, National No SpongeBob Day. Like who even deserves a holiday like that?
I can think of a few, but I can't name.
National No Zeta Magenta Day.
National No Amber Heard Day.
National
No Day.
National No Fury of the Film Fan Day.
That would be a dream.
Yep.
Yeah, but of course, this episode decided to end it on with Patrick getting treated like shit with his own National No Patrick Day.
I would attend that concert. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, that he did deserve that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take away from how sour that ending made me feel.
I don't blame you there.
It's actually good concept for this show that this show could have explored, and it dropped the ball. It dropped the ball hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the worst part is that there could have been better ways to end this episode, actually give better reasons for why they were gone. Heck, even the whole "it was a dream" was better than this.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Cliche as it is, it would have been better than that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Sure,
it would
it's
explain
been
why
cliche.
cars would go up to SpongeBob.
Like this, I could have found a better way to end this episode if I was a writer of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why Gone is my number 25. All right. Coming in at my number 24. You knew this episode was going to be on here. Because my number 24, May 20th, 2005. My number 24 is May 20th, 2005, the day Good Neighbors premiered.
I gotta do my research on this episode. Hang on.
Yeah, this episode was the very first episode that was really hated.
Oh yeah, this episode. The older I get, the more I relate to Squidward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this episode is basically Squidward wanted to have a relaxing Sunday. this episode is basically about Squidward wanting to have a relaxing Sunday, but of course, the demonic duo find a way to ruin it for him. All the while, Squidward is just begging to have a good Sunday. Like, every bad thing that could happen to him happens. Like, Squidward ends up getting painted polka dots on his face, and they mistake him for him being sick. That was not funny.
Fucking more. I don't know who's worse, Flanderize SpongeBob and Patrick or Flanderize the Griffins in Martin Family Guy.
Yeah. And because they made him the president of their new Good Neighbors Club, this episode is you're expected to hate Squidward for the fact that all he wants is a decent Sunday, and he's rightfully mad at because they take away his Sunday. And of course, because of course Squidward is quote unquote sick, SpongeBob and Patrick take an opportunity to flat out steal his pet that's planned for himself.
Go fucking figure.
Which leads to which of course finally angers Squidward to the point where he's at a boiling point, and which leads to Squidward yelling at these two, saying that they are horrible neighbors. Which they deserve.
Honestly, I don't know who. I'd rather live next door to either Homer Simpson instead of SpongeBob.
Right.
Yeah, and this episode, and because of that, Squidward decides to implant a new security system. Because the security system fails to see SpongeBob and Patrick as a threat, Squidward gets mad and beats it to death to the point where not only is it a threat detected, but Squidward gets electrocuted and Squidward's house turns into a robot, which ends up destroying the town.
What the fuck?
Yeah. All right, ready? And I know that this meme has been brought up, but I know this meme has gotten overused, but I have to show it here.
I wonder how much.
Security system. Security system. Squidward's house and begins attacking the city, leaving the memory of Squidward community service for the damage he caused. Even though SpongeBob and Patrick were in his house for time and were responsible for everything. This episode is the Squidward torture porn starts to be regular and stable in SpongeBob's episodes. And this one is just one of the meanest, cruelest, and just plain unfair of them all.
Yeah, that clip sums up this episode well. Yeah, and of course, because the world needed to turn against Squidward for having a decent wanted to have a decent Sunday, he ends up getting community service along with SpongeBob and Patrick for the damage caused for the rest of his for all the Sundays for the rest of his life. This is the very first Squidward torture episode, and boy, does it show.
But it's not the last.
So I heard people make the case that jellyfishing was the first Squidward torture episode, but that's for another topic.
Yeah.
Right.
It was the first, but it was not the last, nor was it ever the worst Squidward torture episode, especially for season 4. Trust me, you'll see one further down. And all in all, Good Neighbors is a terrible episode, and I put it in my number 24. Coming in on number 23, we have one of the absolute worst episodes. We're back to Mr. Krabs being unlikable again, because my number 23 is Summer Job.
The one, let's see where that one is. Summer Job.
It's the episode where
That episode, right? Yeah, that episode where he blackmails Mrs. Puff.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Congratulations, Mr. Krabs. You are now worse than Peter Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. This episode is beyond awful. Like, first of all, remember Boating Buddies? Imagine that, but if Squidward was Mrs. Puff in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And to make matters worse, this episode is about Mrs. Puff ended up crashing into the Krusty Krab because SpongeBob tried to give her a note, which Cecil could have just taken the note and that's it. Like, it really wasn't that much. You could have avoided so much. You could have avoided so much if you just took the note.
Right.
That episode could have been shorter, Mrs. Puff, but no, you had to torture yourself.
And because of Mrs. Puff's fears of being sent to jail, Mr. Krabs decides to keep the secret as long as she works for free under slave labor.
The prisoners.
And if Mrs. Puff tries to bail or tries to, or has a problem with it, he can just report her to the police.
Mm-hmm.
And
I said it once, I'll say it again. Congratulations, Peter Griffin. You are no longer the worst boyfriend-husband in fiction history. Mr. Krabs beat you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the episode is basically just watching SpongeBob try to teach Mrs. Puff about the ins and outs of the Krusty Krab, which would have had comedic potential, but SpongeBob ends up being at one of his most annoying portrayals in the show. All the while, Mrs. Puff suffers. And of course, if that wasn't bad enough, yeah, it is basically Boating Buddies, but with Mrs. Puff.
Yep. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. And we're expected to enjoy watching Puff suffer, which we don't. So Mrs. Puff, having enough of this of this shit, tries to bail and escape. And because Mrs. Puff was angry, she ended up having to rip that note apart, which leads to her getting arrested for littering.
Mm-hmm.
But because, of course, littering is a worse crime in Bikini Bottom, along with reading someone's diary and public nudity.
How many assholes are Bikini Bottom anyway?
Worst police officers ever.
Worse than Chief Wiggum Joe Swanson.
Yeah.
And of
course, with Mrs. Puff being in jail for Mrs. Puff being in jail for 7 years, which is she ends up having to take driver's ed in prison. But guess who is the teacher there?
SpongeBob.
If you guys did,
oh God,
there is so much wrong with that. First off, we all know at this point in the series, SpongeBob can't drive. Like, how does that make any sense? Or what? And this episode is not just and because this episode, we'd have to watch Mrs. Puff scream, but she ends up getting handcuffed to the chair and table, which leads her to cry in despair that SpongeBob is her teacher in prison and has to put up with him for 7 years.
Ugh. Kids, why do you pick this show to be Kids' Choice Awards? I'm just saying, there are shows out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if Teen Titans Go wins. I'm just saying, anyone who's SpongeBob.
Summer Job is a pain to sit through, and it's one of the worst episodes regarding the boating school subgenre, as well as one of Mr. Krabs' worst appearances. And that is why I put Summer Job at my number 23.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at my number 22, it's quite possibly an episode that I'm surprised doesn't get as much hate as it does, and I feel like this deserves way more hate than it gets. My number 22 is from Season 8, Bubble Troubles.
Bubble Troubles. That episode sounds familiar. What is it again?
Give me a minute. I gotta look it up. It's been a while since I've seen SpongeBob.
All right, so let's start with this episode is one of the very rare Sandy torture episodes of the entire series.
That
Oh,
one.
boy.
They accidentally destroy her oxygen supply.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the comments.
The gang works at the Krusty Krab.
Okay, I want to see with Frank eat with the crabs with butter.
So this episode is basically, as I said before, this was the very first episode of the entire series that actually gave me nightmares.
Oof.
On that warrant alone, this episode deserves to be on my worst of list. So this episode starts off with SpongeBob and Patrick blowing bubbles, and boy does it drag. And of course, they get the brilliant idea to make hot sauce bubbles.
Why is it?
Hot and they start with blowing hot sauce bubble in their eyes,
What the fuck?
which leads to them their eyes disintegrating and screaming in pain.
Yeah, I remember a Simpsons episode where one of the kids suggested hot sauce in a water bottle and water balloon. I'd rather take that to the face instead of hot sauce bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, because the world just hates Squidward ends up cutting his bond, his statue of himself. We were trying to model it with a tree, and because Squidward is rightfully mad about this, he ends up getting a giant bubble, and which leads to Squidward being burned to death. But the episode only gets worse. As this episode, that's from Sandy, who was trying to fix her oxygen supply, to quote Sean in the chat, none of this would have happened if SpongeBob and Patrick listened to Sandy when telling him to go away. But no, they don't go away, and they end up blowing bubbles to add to Sandy's oxygen supply. And spoiler alert, it ended up destroying her oxygen supply and gives her time to actually breathe, meaning that she's about to die.
Again, I hate sounding like a broken record, but these guys are worse than Peter and his friends.
Mm-hmm. I'd make the case they're worse than the Always Sunny gang.
No, the Always Sunny gang is funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are
Right.
way worse.
Right.
At least they
So
don't see SpongeBob and Patrick doing blackface.
Right. Good point. But that's a low bar.
Yes, that's.
Yep. And because this episode the rest of the episode is basically just SpongeBob and Patrick trying to get some air and trying to save Sandy. But unfortunately, Sandy's brain starts to evaporate as she goes flipping in. And no, this episode is not funny, it's horrifying. All meanwhile, we're at the mercy of these two idiots being the cause of it. And because because her oxygen depleted all the way through. She ended up taking off her helmet while trying to eat a Krabby Patty.
Jeez. You know, saying my
And-
favorite character, and she does not deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't. And the worst part is that this isn't even the worst episode regarding Sandy getting tortured, as you'll be seeing one in my 10.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, that episode.
Yep. And of course because SpongeBob decides to make a big bubble and try to get it inside her tree dome, which I'm surprised it hasn't popped by the episode's end. But and of course, Sandy's life is saved. But the one problem is that her entire tree dome is now inside the bubble, and it ends up lifting, going back up.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Squirrel Jokes is better than this.
I actually like squirrel jokes. I might do a video on it sometime.
I actually like that episode too. It's two. At least it was tame.
Bubble Troubles. All right, yeah. Patrick's being stupid by saying squirrels aren't supposed to be blue is not funny nor appropriate.
Hey, Patrick, you know who's a better starfish than you? Starro the Conqueror.
Ooh.
And that is why Bubble Troubles is my number 22.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to have some episodes that we're now into some episodes that actually reach nightmare fuel. Because, of course, we have yet another Squidward torture episode in the number 21 spot. This episode is Squid's Visit.
This episode was played for comedy, but it was just messed up.
So this episode is about SpongeBob trying to get Squidward to visit him because SpongeBob claims that Squidward never visited him at his house. And of course, tries to beg Squidward to come home to his house for a visit. Despite Squidward making it clear, no. So Patrick gives SpongeBob the idea to quote-unquote borrow something so Squidward can be able to go to his house to get it back. So what does SpongeBob do? Make an entire renovation of his house, making his home the very same thing as Squidward's house. No, I am not kidding about that. Yeah, exactly. That is a blatant lie. That Squidward stayed
Right.
in SpongeBob's house in the pre-movie. And of course, we're subjected to Squidward being horrified that his entire house is exactly the same as the house he's in right now. And yes, this episode is every bit as horrifying as it sounds. I have a theory, like SpongeBob most likely just stole all of Squidward's stuff. I like to bet that SpongeBob just stole all of Squidward's stuff because there is no way he would get every single thing in Squidward's house accurate. Because he left the chip on his wall all the way to the medicine cabinet.
Right.
And the episode decides and of course, before Squidward finally leaves the pineapple, only to find out that his house was burned down. And of course, Squidward ends up going mentally insane, where he just flat out goes insane inside Squidward's head, and basically goes, Give some casserole while Squidward laughs like a maniac. And and of course Squidward been trying to respond about this. You know what would have made this kind of episode better? Instead of having SpongeBob be the creeper, why not have a new character be the stalker for SpongeBob? For Squidward, I mean, that is.
That's a good point.
If there is something that I can go ahead and say about this episode, this was actually one of the very few episodes alongside a one course meal that actually did scare me when I was younger, but in a very bad way.
Yeah. You have
like that part where Squidward basically fades to black was literally the definition of welcome to the mind fuck.
and it's every bit as horrifying as it sounds. So, and all in all, Squid Visit is one of the worst and creepiest Squidward torture episodes of the series, and it marks my number 21 spot.
Yeah. Admittedly, there are worse Squidward torture episodes, like a specific other episode in season 6, which has a throat clearing gag. But this is the creepiest one.
Yep. And now we have made it to the top 20.
Oh boy.
If you thought it was bad from the last two entries, oh boy, we're down into the worst of the worst. We're really getting there. So coming in, starting off my top 20 is the worst episode of season 4. That is The Thing.
Basically, this episode is if you took jellyfishing and make it to where there was no reason for Squidward to even get like this in the first place.
Yep. So in another day of Squidward trying to get out of SpongeBob and Patrick's antics because they were bothering him and trying to watch his TV, Squidward takes a bike accident and ends up getting trapped in cement.
Yeah, and as well as also not being recognized by SpongeBob and Patrick, even though SpongeBob and Patrick should know by now that Squidward has been wrapped in something before. Like, he was literally in bandages in jellyfishing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're subjected to watching Squidward not retaliate his torment. So instead, we have to watch him almost damn near. We have to hear his cries and whimpers throughout the episode. And yes, it's painful, as every bit as painful as it sounds.
Like in most other episodes where Squidward is being tormented, at least he was able to defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and yes, and knowing the fact that Squidward almost would have flatlined by the episode's end, like the fact that considering the idea that he almost flatlined, because being trapped in cement is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
If he was trapped in cement, you would die. Because
Exactly.
there's no place for him to breathe. And of course, this episode decides to throw in Gary, pretty much attacking quote unquote Smelly, aka Squidward, which leads to Patrick taking Smelly in, only to end up calling animal control on him. And of course, this leads to Squidward being taken away to be at the zoo for him to forced to watch him get laughed.
Yeah. Here's this season 4 is not the worst, not the showcase of the worst Squidward torture episodes in the show. Like the worst by then has yet to come, but season 4 was the sign where the Squidward torture episodes were starting to get very bad. Like season 4 was also the same season that gave us Good Neighbors as well as Squidward.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously though, the fact that everyone is calling Smelly in this episode ugly makes it all the more infuriating. Like, this one's actually worse than both Squidward and Good Neighbors because we're supposed to deal with that Squidward could die.
Right.
And he's getting laughed at.
Mm-hmm.
Like to SpongeBob and Patrick's defense in this episode, they didn't know that Smelly was actually Squidward, but still though, this episode is hard to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, this episode ends with Squidward being in the sewer, and to find out that we actually see a bit of his quote unquote chin. And it does kind of end on a happy note, only because Squidward is able to see Kelpie G, who it will be in another episode we'll be talking about later on.
And the episode flat out ends with it implying that they were about to maul Squidward because they look shocked at him.
Mm-hmm. Right. This
So,
episode
yeah,
has a lot of messed up implications.
Yeah, the thing is the worst episode of season 4, and a terrible way to start off the top 20. And the thing that this won't even be the last episode on the list. Oh, it definitely won't be the last.
Yeah. Season 6 and 7 were when Squidward torture was at its absolute worst.
And at number 19, we have yet another Squidward torture episode on the list. Cephalopod Lodge.
Yeah. Oh god. This episode is literally SpongeBob and Patrick basically ruin Squidward's role at the lodge, all because SpongeBob saw Squidward smiling.
Yeah, like seriously though, SpongeBob and Patrick should have just minded business. Let Squidward be happy.
Exactly.
So this episode, Squidward gets kicked out of the lodge because of SpongeBob and Patrick entering it, and because Squidward's associated with those two, Squidward gets kicked out. But which leads to a plot hole that this episode actually points out. Why didn't the door guard do anything when they were about to come in?
Yeah.
They literally just established a secret handshake. So, quite frankly, yeah, Patrick was right. This was the door guard's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Like-
like something that this episode also did that I do need to say right now. Maybe if you guys didn't want SpongeBob and Patrick to go to get in the lodge in the first place, why didn't you do anything about it? And also you should have said, "Oh, you two are not allowed in this lodge again."
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we have good neighbors. They have to like to rip off Good Neighbors of all episodes. And we have to want to make Squidward a part of member of their club, which consists of, I shit you not, getting stung by a jellyfish on the tongue.
Yeah, that part was painful. And let me go ahead and say this right now. Any part in SpongeBob that involves characters getting pain, having their tongue be in pain is some of the most painful stuff in all of SpongeBob, alongside that whole thing in the Splinter.
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
the
by the way, did
toenail
I forget?
scene.
Yep. Oh, by the way, if that mention that when the lodge when one of the people in the lodge decides to remove all of Squidward's clothing, including his underwear.
Oh God. Those people should be in jail for that.
No matter if it's some kind of secret organization or whatever.
Also, SpongeBob and Patrick end up trying to cover their eyes, which implies that Squidward has a dick, even though his dick is him. Yeah.
Squidward cleans his clothes in a washer. There's no way that anyone is going to find out that that the lodge that he was in the lodge. And plus, it can't be a secret if there's literally a building for it.
So yeah. So SpongeBob and Patrick try to get Squidward back into the lodge by making a not very convincing eel using a giant sock.
If I could say something real quick, if I could say something real quick regarding the whole secret lodge thing, do you want to hear another secret? Do you want to hear another secret? The sky is blue.
Huh. Yeah. So this other dumb plan actually worked because they were finally able to enter the lodge, right?
Well, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to exit the sock way too early.
And of course, he gets kicked out again and is welcome back to the lodge, which ends in the exact same way as we have to watch again, watching Squidward get his tongue stung by a jellyfish. Yeah, and this episode has the line that's the last he enjoyed in his life, and SpongeBob and Patrick ruined it too.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Squidward wanted to bang his head on the door repeatedly. This might be one of the worst Squidward torture episodes in terms of the amount of Squidward torture he gets out an episode. This has to be the most lopsided episode on the list so far.
Yeah. This episode literally feels like if Good Neighbors was basically paired with something like Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom.
Oh boy.
That is why Good Neighbors. I mean, this is why Cephalopod Lodge is my number 19. Coming in at number 18. Oh boy, we're not even close to being done with the Squidward torture episodes on the list. Coming in at number 18. Mr. Enter, this one's on you. Breath of Squidward.
Definitely, this episode is definitely SpongeBob at his worst.
Yeah, very high up there. But this should just be called the two faces of SpongeBob.
Yeah, This episode basically has SpongeBob getting annoyed because Squidward is basically happy like him, even though he's basically like this towards Squidward a lot of the time, and when Squidward is basically like this, apparently it's a problem.
Yeah. And this episode establishes that SpongeBob and Patrick break into Squidward's house to watch the sunrise, and they break into his house pretty much every single morning.
Ah.
That part of the episode was just why.
Yeah, and of course, and because Squidward decides to plant an electric fence around his home, this episode Squidward gets electrocuted, so his personality switches, and he pretty much becomes this happy-go-lucky guy. He becomes like SpongeBob to the point where he gets to the point where even SpongeBob gets annoyed.
Boy, where have we seen this before? Squidward puts up a security system to keep SpongeBob and Patrick out of their house.
It's a case of deja fuck you.
So this episode, you would think that we can be happy because Squidward finally gets a bit of happiness, but no. This episode openly states that apparently it's wrong for Squidward to be happy.
Exactly. Security system changes Squidward for the best, but SpongeBob is not happy that Squidward is happy, and then SpongeBob decides to snap at Squidward at the end of the episode. Gah! Bleep this episode.
Yeah, and Squidward gets and of course Squidward gets treated by a creep by pretty much everyone, including one to give a kid a free Krusty Krab hat. So apparently this episode says when SpongeBob acts annoying, it's apparently okay, but when Squidward acts annoying, apparently that's a cardinal sin.
And something worth noting about this episode is that it was paired with To Love a Patty, which is very telling because this episode literally has reveals that SpongeBob put a smiley face on a Krabby Patty. Which why do you have to remind the audience that this is the episode that it's paired up with?
Right.
And of course, we finally get to Squidward getting a congratulations party, and SpongeBob cries about it. Dude, I don't feel sorry for him at all.
Exactly, especially when he's been annoying Squidward throughout a lot of the series up to that point. Like this episode came out a season after Good Neighbors, Squidward, and Squidward.
And you know what makes SpongeBob decide to rage at new Squidward?
Squidward pogo dancing next to Patrick, which he's able to pogo dance next to Squidward next to Patrick as well. Like there's plenty of room at the party for him to be able to do that.
Right.
And Squidward please SpongeBob kicking him out of his own party. And of course, Squidward is upset about that. Only for this episode to relapse and says, maybe I was too hard on new Squidward. Yeah, you know what you're doing. So Squidward ends up trying to go over to his own house, but which apparently, like, how is that fence even still working after him getting electrocuted?
Yeah,
fizzled out by that point.
And then Squidward gets electrocuted by the fence again and turned back to normal. Gah! Bleep this episode. This episode is where the Squidward torture porn started to become a regular staple in SpongeBob's episodes.
And yeah, And of course, this episode ends with everyone becoming Squidward.
What the heck?
If there's an episode that confirms that the universe hates Squidward, it's this episode. Good Neighbors might have been the first, but this episode just confirmed that Squidward torture is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Like season five may have been the show's last season where it did have some integrity on itself, but seasons 4 and 5 were definitely the first signs of the show having really bad episodes.
And to think that we're only at number 18, God, ball. All right, coming in at number 17 is yet again another Squidward torture episode.
Oh no.
Coming in at number 17, Boating Buddies.
Oh boy, the episode that Summer Job ripped off.
Yep, and while Squid Visit is arguably arguably the most horrifying torture episode, this one is arguably the creepiest one.
Yeah, This episode has a literally has a claustrophobic vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like seriously though, you want to look at his face and tell me that you are not even the least bit creeped out.
The only good part of this entire episode is that random bit with the discarded potato chip thing where the gang are basically shrink down to microscopic size.
Right.
Look at it. Freaking look at it.
That's the face that a psycho would make.
Mm-hmm.
So in this episode, Squidward ends up tries to get away from SpongeBob, which results in him losing his boat smarts. And he goes back to boating school, but he's stuck with SpongeBob. Throughout the episode, he's basically just watching SpongeBob fawn over Squidward every chance he gets, and makes his life in boating school hell.
That part where SpongeBob puts his fingers on Squidward's arm was just no, don't do that, SpongeBob.
And this episode, and of course, if the episode isn't claustrophobic, this episode is also just watching Squidward get beat up multiple times.
Yeah, Squidward is literally in a full-size cast by the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, Squidward tells him that he'll never be his boating buddy ever. But of course, Squidward tries to take his test, but he fails.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, because Squidward fails the test, Squidward has to come back next week, which means he's gonna have to repeat the cycle of him being tortured in boating school.
Yeah.
Back his license.
And also, Mrs. Puff should have actually given Squidward a pass on this, considering the fact that he was literally in a full-size cast. Like, when I broke my leg, my school, I remember full well that my school didn't really hold it against me all that much.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, this episode may come off as wasted, also wasted potential, because you have Squidward and Mrs. Puff, two people that hate SpongeBob.
Yeah, This episode honestly could have just been about Mrs. Puff and Squidward forming a close bond with each other. Like if this episode, like if the new seasons basically basically tries to do a better plot of this episode, they could do this. But they haven't done it yet. But I do know that they did bring back the relationship between Mrs. Puff and Mr. Krabs. So maybe there's a chance that the new seasons could do this.
Yeah, but I mean, if season 13 Seaman SpongeBob hated anything to go by, you could have actually seen this kind of plot work.
Exactly.
But no, this episode chose to take the proverbial and make it into a Squidward torture porn.
Mm-hmm.
And Voting Buddies sits comfortably at number 17.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. I have to do something real quick. I'll be right back.
All right. Number 16. So far on the list. Another Squidward torture episode. Yeah, this is the sixth one in a row we have to talk about.
Yeah, this show, this show during its mid seasons really hates Squidward.
Yep, but funnily enough, this episode came from season 11, and this episode is this is the first and only sequel on the list, and I think you can guess which one.
Ink
My
Lemonade.
Number 16, yup, Lemonade is my number 16.
Basically, this episode combines the issues that most episodes from the post sequel seasons have had so far. Like this episode basically goes overboard with the facial expressions. The episode is extremely boring. The episode shows Patrick shows one of Patrick's worst moments in the series. Like he literally decides to milk Squidward for his own personal gain. And last but not least, it's a Squidward torture episode. Like in season 11 alone, we had Fun Size Friends, which was boring. We had Bunny Hunt, which was a Squidward torture episode. And No Pictures, Please, which has Patrick along with Rube terrorizing everyone in Bikini Bottom.
Yep.
This episode combines all of those issues into one. And alongside the problem with Fun Size Friends, where the episode is extremely uncomfortable to watch, that episode had a problem where all SpongeBob and Patrick were basically doing was tormenting these cute, adorable, mini-sized versions of themselves. But back to this episode. This episode is literally Squidward getting milked and psychologically damaged.
Yeah, like we're literally seeing Squidward drench out all of his ink, which is probably their show's version of blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are just drinking Squidward's blood.
And of course, everyone in the bottom drinks it.
Everyone gets AIDS.
The episode already shows it's literal gross out. Like at the beginning of the episode, Patrick basically Squidward basically throws a trash lemon at Patrick's eye, and Patrick thinks that he could salvage it, and one of the Bikini Bottom mites basically drinks it and has a Band-Aid on his tongue. Like, why did we need to see that?
And why do we need to see Patrick's insides? I thought this was if you were to tell me this was a season 6 episode, I believed you.
like the only other episode that I would in the post sequel seasons that I would consider on par with the season 6, 7, and 8 episode is Plain to See, but this one is close.
Yeah. And the only part of this episode that I actually liked was the haunted house scene, which was admittedly creative. I'll give them that. That's the only thing I'll give this episode for.
And like Patrick Patrick is usually very likable in the recent seasons, but in this episode he literally disregards Squidward's well-being, as well as traumatizes Squidward just to get ink out of him.
Yeah. Like, this would have been a bad episode in season 6, right? But for season 11, it's actually worse, considering the fact that this was during the Renaissance era, back when Berg was working on this show.
Exactly. And like this episode, and it's especially insulting considering the fact that this episode was literally paired with one of the best episodes of that season, My Leg. Like, I would have preferred if they actually paired My Leg with something like Mustard on Mine, or maybe even another good episode from season 11, but anything but this episode.
This episode is uncomfortable, and I have no problem calling it not only the worst episode of the post-sequel era, but a strong contender for the number 16 spot. And this is probably going to be the last Squidward torture episode for a little bit.
Yeah, because the worst has yet to come.
Yeah, the worst. Like, we're not even in the top 10. Prepare yourselves. We're in hell. Coming in at number 15 is the second worst episode of season 5. And you know Pie Guy rules, right?
Yeah.
Well, this episode managed to break him.
Yeah. This forget Squid's visit. This is the most horrifying episode of the entire series.
Yeah. Seriously, in this episode, we have to watch SpongeBob being stalked by jellyfish.
This episode, basically, it's a ripoff of Jellyfish Jam.
Very much.
And if the episode was just watching SpongeBob try to get away from jellyfish and was just basically a short, then I would have world it. No, it's
like SpongeBob, like season 5 was the same season that did give us some short episodes.
Yeah, but of course, the episode's second half takes a far darker turn for the worse.
Yeah, apparently, it's literally revealed that SpongeBob was
sorry, that's my dog.
That SpongeBob was away from the Krusty Krab and has been living in a cave for literally years, and he basically finds the Krusty Krab in ruins.
Yeah, I hate it when the entire world is destroyed. I think this episode was meant to be a reference to Planet of the Apes, but this was a horrible parody of that.
Yeah, do you want to when you do this in like a show that is supposed to be this lighthearted, you're basically scarring kids. From what I know, Planet of the Apes is actually supposed to be for adults or something.
Yeah. And can we also talk about that Patrick's line in the episode where SpongeBob has become a negative influence? Was that meant to be a metaphor for this show started to decline?
Apparently so. There's also the metaphor in Stanley SquarePants where SpongeBob said, "There's nothing good on TV." and then he looks at the screen. Nothing.
So yeah, this was the episode that made Pie Guy Rules realize how bad the show has gotten. In fact, it was probably the entire reason why. It was probably the first rant of the entire show.
Yeah. By the time that this episode came out, season 5 was getting near the end. So Pie Guy Rules was sort of right on this, but 2007 was still the time when SpongeBob had some integrity.
But of course, this, along with another episode on the list, managed to dictate the future of and paint a very negative future for the show going forward. And that's why SpongeHenge gets the number 15 spot and is the second worst episode of season 5. Coming in at number 14. Number 14 and number 13 could have easily been interchangeable with one another because I almost put these in a tie. But after some thinking around, this one just had to be number 4. This just had to. It was probably the least bad of the group because my number 14 is Stuck in the Ringer.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we're down. We've really made it into irredeemable territory.
Yeah. This episode is basically a less painful version of the Splinter.
So this episode starts with SpongeBob taking a shower. He ends up dropping soap and ends up slipping, which leaves him getting stuck in his ringer.
Oh god, this episode. Sorry, I just had to eat dinner.
Yeah.
And because Patrick enters the scene, and because Patrick is more stupider than he's ever been, he decides to, I shit you not, put permanent glue on him finger.
Hello, I'm back. Sorry.
Right? Yeah. Let me hear that before. Patrick basically just puts glue on SpongeBob and his ringer, which leaves them to be permanently stuck.
Yeah. Like this is literally Patrick at his most infuriating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's even more insulting considering that he had him. He basically just says, "There you go, buddy. Now you're stuck forever."
Like SpongeBob point blank says the words, "I need to help getting out of this." Like Patrick literally listened to SpongeBob and thought SpongeBob said, "I wanted to be stuck forever." He never said that.
Yeah, well, and of course, because of Patrick, SpongeBob had to deal with the consequences of his actions, as we see in the Krusty Krab. Here's what was happening there.
Just like this episode is basically to describe it. It literally feels like the Splinter, but less painful. I mean, SpongeBob even tries the same technique that he did in the Splinter, where he basically uses other parts of his body to basically flip Krabby Patties.
Mm.
And because this episode wants to torture SpongeBob, SpongeBob ends up getting some mustard in Squidward's eyes, which leaves it to, I shit you not, being ripped out.
Yeah, that's the point where the episode goes the Splinter on us. Like why did you have to show us that?
And of course, a tragedy occurs because SpongeBob ends up getting the cashier torn off, which ends up hurting a guy's foot, leaving him to get hurt, and it leads to him getting hurt on his face. And SpongeBob gets over himself, and for all the money to pretty much like get out of the cashier until everyone decides to grab the money that they should know that it isn't theirs.
Also episode, don't you dare ruin the my leg gag.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, Mr. Krabs being furious about this, he basically throws SpongeBob out of Krusty Krab for life. And in despair. And because Patrick do, he basically decides to take him ice cream.
Yeah, and basically decides to be unhelpful when SpongeBob is unable to eat ice cream, and basically takes SpongeBob's ice cream when he leaves the store.
Yeah, and instead of trying to go to the hospital or trying to take him to Sandy, he has decided to take him for ice cream, and because SpongeBob can't swallow the damn thing, it implies that he's going to starve to death.
Yeah, and Patrick just doesn't care.
So instead of actually trying to help him, also, isn't ice cream technically a liquid?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so instead, Patrick decides to take him to the carnival. Where basically...
a place where SpongeBob cannot use his arms.
Yeah, and it leads to him getting tossed out of the ride, and end up getting a black eye.
And the episode suddenly expects you to feel scorn for SpongeBob when he basically yells at Patrick, even though it was Patrick's fault that this happened in the first place.
Yeah.
It's everyone
That
thinking about an
scene
asshole.
was nothing. That scene was nothing short of infuriating.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that guy went all like, dude, it's not your, it's not that ringer that is the problem. It's your heart.
And of course, lines with "you deserve what you got," and like, people were just born mean. You're telling it to the guy You're telling it to the guy who basically tried to save their butts from playing in the movie.
Then again, from what I've been hearing, these seasons actually take place before the movie, so yeah. But still though, they don't even know what SpongeBob has went through in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course, Pat decides to cry about it. He deserved it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I don't care what Bikini Bomb citizens say. He caused this, not SpongeBob. Is everyone going to be Bomb an asshole?
No, and that's actually the worst part about this episode, and that's not even getting into the climax.
Yeah, they basically everything is solved by SpongeBob and Patrick crying, and it basically decides to turn the glue into a liquid, and it slides off of them. Even though isn't it supposed to be called forever glue? Like it's called forever glue in that it sticks to you forever.
Lazy write. And where's a Deadpool? Well, that's his lazy writing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and top this off with the episode that made Mr. Enter go on a rant about the writers of the episode. I guess crying does solve your problems after all.
Isn't it great that they're trying to teach kids such valuable lessons in life? Yeah, you three. What's the word I'm looking for? Dipshits? No, that word is too good for you. Souls? That's not quite right either. Fuckers? No, I'm just gonna call you excuses for humanity until I can find a description that perfectly suits your crude, idiotic, and juvenile talents. Answers. What reality do you thrive in? I really want to know. I'm genuinely curious. In this reality, it's conventional wisdom that it actually takes an adult to write for children. What am I saying? That's not fair. Children would make better writers than you three. Hell, infants would. My dog would. You mindless, degenerate acts. You get no one to thank your lucky stars every single day that whatever the fuck you sold your souls to was stupid enough to give you your jobs. Because if you lose your job, it's straight shit. It's likely never work again. Not just in television, but in any job. Want to retard themselves so substantially to even reluctantly want your demented poison around. Just leave us alone and go back to the fucking sledge you came from.
Yeah, that rant, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll admit that one rant was actually kind of funny, but at the same time, yeah, this was definitely one of Mr. Ender's worst moments.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I mean-
alongside him showing Casey Alexander's Twitter feed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, thank God in more recent Mr. Enter has redeemed him, but yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Stuck in the Ringer is an awful episode and it's one of Patrick's first appearances, and yet somehow the next episode that's on the list is even worse.
Look at what Mr. Chilbian said.
Yep. No, we're at number 13. Whoa, boy. Number 13. If you thought Stuck in the Ringer was the worst of Patrick in season 7, this is the episode that I almost put a tie for this spot. Because my number 13 is yours, mine, and mine.
Ah.
The episode where SpongeBob and Patrick fight over a toy. But I'm just gonna say this right now. This is definitely Patrick's worst episode.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it really is. Although there is one more I'll be talking about later on, but we'll get to that. In this episode, we're basically just watching, but Patrick decides to. So we start at the Krusty Krab. Basically, SpongeBob tries to get the idea about sharing, but of course, Patrick decides to steal SpongeBob's wallet and eat all of the Krabby Patty. Sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, Patrick basically starts it by eating all of the Krabby Patty, and Patrick is basically preaching about how he and SpongeBob should be sharing it, even though he has not done his part at all.
Yeah. And Patrick decides to whine that there isn't a toy in there.
Even though I don't even though the Krusty Krab has never sold a toy outside of that one episode, Born Again Crabs.
Mhm.
Or in Mermaid Man versus SpongeBob from season 5.
Yeah.
So Mr. Krab's idea to make a toy on the spot, which is basically just using a Krabby Patty, straw limbs, and a case. And I'm just gonna come on and say, and there's a bit of a plot hole here. Back into Love a Patty, we did see how that Krabby Patty went bad after 6 hours. So throughout the entire episode, Krabby Patty ended up staying good, fresh, for whatever reason, and it doesn't show to expire or rot.
and it's funny that you mention Mermaid Man versus SpongeBob, because there have been times in which the Krusty Krab have sold toys, and they look like normal toys.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're forced to endure watching Patrick try to hog the toy and not let SpongeBob have his turn.
Like he wouldn't even let SpongeBob say goodnight to it.
Mm-hmm.
So Patrick decides to throw a party all night and dance with it, which also has another plot hole. Why hasn't Squidward tried to call the police on Patrick?
Yeah, like Squidward has noticed that SpongeBob has decided to throw a party with the jellyfish, and he tried to scold SpongeBob for it.
And yet, for whatever reason, Squidward pretty much disappears from the episode.
Then again, this isn't the first time that there was an oversight like this in the show. Like there was literally an episode in season 8 where specifically in Spongiac, where Squidward's house is not in the frame when SpongeBob goes over to Patrick's house.
Huh.
So this episode, as we enter morning, SpongeBob tries to get the toy, but Patrick tries to lie and tries to use tactics to getting out of sharing the toy. This episode also even had a bit of a gag where SpongeBob claimed that he had his milkshake license.
Even though a season later, they basically said that his milkshake license expired 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's like, and it's an episode that was so much better than.
That episode is a lot better than this one. Although, and let me just say this right now. Here's something that I really don't get about this episode, and this goes back to the problem. Why is it that getting a kiss from your grandma discouraged in Bikini Bottom, but fighting over a literal toy is accepted?
Yeah, and of course we have to watch them fight over a toy, which ends up leading them to Sandy, who basically acts like mediator, and says that the problem with them was a lack of communication. And did I forget to mention they weren't wearing their helmet when they entered Sandy's home?
Yeah, exactly. They were not wearing their helmets.
So they turned an animation error into a reason for them to continue the conflict. The spoiler: her advice did not work.
Is everyone from Bikini Bottom and from Florida? Good one, Smoking Wrecker.
Yeah.
Everyone from Florida is stupid.
So of course, they're bickering leads all the way to the Krusty Krab, where Patrick, I shit you not, actually eats the toy.
Yeah, and then Mr. Krabs comes out and basically puts the blame on both of them, even though all of this would not have happened if Patrick shared the toy like they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then Patrick basically has the gall to say that SpongeBob has not learned anything about sharing.
Right.
And of course, Mr. Krabs decides to give them 2 new toys. Patrick decides to steal SpongeBob's money again, and claims that SpongeBob has learned nothing about sharing.
You didn't learn anything about sharing, Patrick.
Hypocrite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the worst episodes of Patrick being horrible. And the reason why this one's higher than Stuck is because we're stuck in the ringer. At least this episode wasn't teaching morals about sharing. Something that actually happens to us.
Yeah, and the joke, the moral that they did teach at the end of that episode was supposed to be a joke.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this episode plays it completely straight. There was no hint of it being joked. That's this episode in a nutshell. And I can't fathom how you can make Patrick worse than this episode here. But, as always, you can do so much worse. And we're only at number 13. We're like two steps away from the top 10. Yeah, this episode was originally from my top 10 worst. Look where it ended up now. Let that be an omen for you.
Oh boy.
Coming in at number 12, we are back to the Squidward torture episodes of the entire show.
Oh boy.
And this one came from season 9. Squid Baby.
Oh, that. Ugh.
You know, say what you want about the previous Squidward tour episodes. At least he had a chance to defend himself. In this episode, nope. You want to know why?
Why?
Because he's a baby.
Right.
He got turned into one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come out and say it. This has to be the most ableist episode of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So
Like,
this episode starts out with SpongeBob and Patrick pretending to be babies. Look, I've kind of been childish before, but not to this degree.
Yeah, like it's like this episode, like it's embarrassing. But yet it's not okay for SpongeBob to want to get a kiss from his grandma.
Yeah, and of course Squidward ends up getting mad, but of course he ends up hitting his head on the mailbox, which leads to Squidward's head being inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Well, they take up to the
and in the episode's own words, Squidward gets head goes boom boom itis.
Itis is not a disease. It's inflammation. Did a fanfic writer write this episode? Was this episode meant to be a fan fiction?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, I mean, the episode is even structured like it's some sort of fetish fan fiction or something.
Yeah. So SpongeBob and Patrick try to take care of Squidward, only for him to continuously get hurt because of Patrick, where Patrick literally bangs Squidward's head up the wall after being told not to get his head hurt, because otherwise, if his head continues to get hurt, he will stay like that forever.
But yet they continually hit his head against things throughout the entirety of the episode.
And this episode is basically the following: child abuse, gross out, and diapers.
Yeah.
This episode is basically called Child Abuse, the episode. So, of course, and because and for 72 hours of dealing with all of this, SpongeBob unfortunately has to take Squidward, baby Squidward, to the Krusty Krab, and Mr. Krabs. Oh God! I'm surprised very little people actually talk about how horrible he is here, how he's this uncaring, and how unsympathetic he is towards Squidward's condition.
Yeah, and this is also an episode where the townsfolk are also unlikable.
Mm-hmm.
Like seriously though,
Like I know that the Bikini Bottomites have been jerks before, but in this episode, they seem to be more impatient than ever.
like as SpongeBob tries to take care of Squidward, everyone in Bikini Bottom basically yells at him.
Mm-hmm.
And because nobody in here cares, this episode, Mr. Krabs be more unsympathetic and tells SpongeBob to not, change his diaper in front of the customers, but to try to tell him to go take his baby to change the diaper in the kitchen instead of
And what makes this even worse is that when the customers get grossed out, he basically decides to take it out on SpongeBob and Squidward. Like, what reaction were you expecting, Mr. Krabs?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this episode throws in my face joke. Yeah, they want to ruin my leg. My face. Also my leg, but mostly my face. Don't you try to ruin that classic gag.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, because this episode decided to make such a lazy cop-out, Squidward ends up getting his head hurt again, only to end up in ice, only to get this and manage to turn his head back to normal. After an entire episode of diapers, fed, gross out, and crying, Squidward decides to find out that his diaper is filled with feces.
Oh God!
And Squidward basically leaves the episode. They may never speak about this episode again. Rightfully so.
Honestly, if only we could never speak about this episode again, but apparently not because it's a part of the show.
Like, be a strong contender for one of the worst Squidward torture episodes. The fact that this episode isn't even in the top 10 should tell you something.
Oh boy.
That is why Squid Baby is my number 12. We're at number 11, and we're back to Patrick being online. Because if you thought that it couldn't reach its worst with either Yours, Mine, and Mine stuck in the ringer, let this episode convince you that.
So a double whammy, a Gary torture episode mixed with a Patrick's a prick episode.
Yes. This episode is basically
a lot of people say that this episode is a ripoff of A Pal for Gary. I'd actually argue that this episode is like I Was a Teenage Gary if Patrick babysat Gary instead of Squidward. But at least with I Was a Teenage Gary, Squidward was concerned about SpongeBob's pet,
and he did face the consequences to an extent. And regardless, like, that episode was paying homage to those old school horror movies, so for the most part, it did its job. Mm-hmm.
Yep, in this episode, Patrick ends up trying to take care of Gary, which, if rule of thumb is anything to go by, he decides to torture his cousin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, and he makes Gary starve to death. He basically not only make him starve to death, but also water at him and try to throw as much salt and trying to dry him with it. And of course, he tries to Gary up with a flamethrower.
Yeah, and what's even worse than that is that if there was no blow dryer around, Patrick was going to use salt. That's not funny. That's sadistic.
That's animal abuse.
Yeah, and I thought, seriously though, that's animality. And if you thought that joke in Fairly Odd Parents, where Timmy got his snail killed in a salt factory, was unpleasant, this episode makes you wince.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and some try to argue that SpongeBob is likable in this episode because he does show concern for Gary. We disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you want about that other episode we'll be talking about later. At least Gary went in that episode mostly unharmed.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Gary faces brutal punishments throughout the episode, almost getting killed, which leads to him mauling Patrick. Which, yeah, Patrick deserves it.
Mm-hmm. And basically, here's something that this episode does that still bewilders me to this day. Why did Gary suddenly change his mood about Patrick?
Huh?
Yeah. He suddenly started laughing when the house got flooded, and when SpongeBob came back, he was reading Patrick a story.
Which ends on a Gainax ending. Yeah, this episode might be Patrick at his absolute worst. And probably the worst Patrick's a Jerk episode, worst standalone one on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Pet Center Pat is a horrible episode. It marks its place at number 11. And now we're here. We have officially made it rock bottom.
Not the episode.
Yeah, we're at rock bottom now, ladies and gentlemen. We've get to the worst of the worst. We're in the top 10 worst episodes. Prepare a rage rant. It will not be pretty. So kicking off at number 10, we have. Remember when I said that in my thoughts on Bubble Troubles that it wouldn't be the worst Sandy torture episode? That's because.
Oh boy. Oh, that episode. That episode is like one of the most gross and what the hell things. First of all, I have to agree with Mr. Edger on one thing. When Plankton said, as positive as a shark attack or whatever, that's racist.
This episode is basically a ripoff of Imitation Crabs.
A shitty ripoff, I might add.
Why did season 7 like to rip off that episode so much? Like, it was a good episode, but nowhere near the show's best.
Right.
Yeah. This episode states that Sandy is able to remove her and pelt.
Yeah. Which, first of all, that made it that scene in Survival of the Idiots doesn't make sense. I mean, I understand SpongeBob didn't have the best continuity, but still.
And of course, and this episode is the first time Sandy and Plankton ever interacted in the entire show.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's what we have to endure. So Plankton decides to steal Sandy's pelt. But you don't know what's a weird plot hole? Like, Plankton didn't even steal her suit.
Mhm.
Like,
And,
know.
and also the other Bikini Bottomites as well as SpongeBob are very blind in this episode because who they're interacting with doesn't even have a mouth or even eyes.
Yeah.
And of course, this episode has an A that is boring, which is anything that starts with plankton, because we're watching plankton basically try to ask, quote, Sandy, and he ends up accidentally jumps out in excitement around Sandy's eyes and mouth. Like, how did they not notice while putting the formula right there?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, this episode is boring because we're watching SpongeBob teach Plankton how to make a Krabby Patty, which leads to the obnoxious try again.
Plankton literally says that it's tedious, and he's literally being the audience's surrogate.
Yeah, that was boring. But the B plot is everyone in town harassing and making fun of Sandy for being without her pelt.
Which, first off, I find that laughable. I mean, sure, yes, but you people are wearing swimsuits.
Yeah,
We'll get more to that
like
later.
Sandy is not even naked because she's literally wearing her regular bikini.
Mm-hmm.
Also, might I throw out the mind that even some fish in one episode is fully naked.
Right.
And SpongeBob and Patrick have been naked before.
Right. Live nude pranksters.
Yeah. And apparently, because in this episode, one puts emphasis on her torment. And this actually was the very first episode I actually hated as a kid. Like, this was the first episode I really did despise at 9 years old.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, because this episode is basically watching everyone in Bikini Bottom torment her for pretty much no reason. And just when he thought to get a bigger balls, this episode decides to end with Sandy apprehending Plankton for stealing her fur, only for, I shit you not, the same fish to arrest her on the spot for public nudity.
Even though Sandy is not even nude.
Right.
Like, seriously, no. What did she do to deserve this?
Nothing.
This was the very first episode I hated as a kid, and to this day, it's one of the worst episodes on principle alone. Yeah, you can argue Mr. Pet is a worst episode, but for me, I can't stress how much I hated this. For that, Someone in the Kitchen with Sandy deserves to be in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at number 9. You may have noticed that there have been a lack of specials on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're finally arrived at some of the specials of the show. Spoiler: 3 of them have made this top 10.
I know which one.
So coming in at my number 9 is the worst episode of season 5. Whatever happened to SpongeBob?
Wet Pants.
The episode is literally expecting us to sympathize with a bunch of characters who insulted SpongeBob at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I like. Well, everyone, Good Neighbors, the show where the show jumped the shark. To me, this is where SpongeBob officially went downhill.
Mm-hmm.
But this episode has all the tropes that you hate during season 6 through 8. The spirited tone, as we watch everyone call SpongeBob an idiot boy, especially Patrick and Sandy.
Like SpongeBob, like Sandy, like Sandy has gotten mad with SpongeBob before, but she just straight up insults him because of a misunderstanding. Like SpongeBob didn't mean to destroy her robot.
Yeah. Regarding Patrick, why is the cake outside? Yeah. This episode is the start of the Bad Ratings Traps episode that we have at Atlantis SquarePants. This episode contains gross out. Like, look at this face. Look at it.
Oh God.
This episode has some very contrived storytelling as SpongeBob entering amnesia.
Apparently he's been knocked out for an entire year, but you can't. But that's not physically possible. Like you can't be sitting around for an entire year without getting any sort of food or anything like that. Like SpongeBob was apparently asleep for an entire year, but yet he didn't even eat anything, but he's still alive.
Oh yeah, that's also not to mention the fact that the Krusty Krab goes haywire, and everyone, but barring Squidward, basically are sad that SpongeBob's gone, not because of their fuck ups, but he's not doing what they're doing.
Like seriously, how has SpongeBob been gone for an entire year, but nobody noticed until that specific date?
Yeah, and that's not even getting to mention the fact that this episode has Squidward at one of his most comfortable he's been. Like, yeah, he can be annoying with SpongeBob, but but he only really tries to save SpongeBob, only to get an egg out of this.
You know, this is the same Squidward whom in the first season stuck up for SpongeBob when he got yelled at because he didn't give a customer a drink, as well as felt bad when he pranked SpongeBob in Fools in April,
and stood up for SpongeBob. Like, I mean, he called out Mr. Krabs for selling SpongeBob out.
And not to mention either, he did a nice thing of dressing up as Santa Claus in order to make SpongeBob happy.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to do SpongeBob's entire list in Dying for Pie specifically because he wanted to make SpongeBob happy before he basically blow up, but apparently SpongeBob didn't. But yet, in this episode, he's selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is definitely one of Squidward's worst appearances, alongside Little Yellow Book.
Right.
All right,
there's also the amnesia story.
Yeah, which of course, in order for SpongeBob's amnesia to go away, Squidward accidentally drops the egg and it lands on the same head.
Even though SpongeBob could have been hit in the head by something else.
And of course, his memory's back, and New Kelp City becomes a nightmare. And of course, after the fact that he was mayor. Also, this episode wasted Ray Liotta.
Mm-hmm. Rest in peace.
Yeah, he deserved it. Overall, whatever happened is one of the very worst specials of the entire show, and is what I like to call the jump the shark moment for the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even though the episode came out in season 8, when in 2008, when the series was starting to go through its seasonal starting to get really bad with season 6. So this was right in the middle of season 6. So the show already started jumping the shark earlier with the Splinter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
which came out earlier that year.
yeah. But considering the fact that this episode was near the end of season 5, yeah, I can't be the only one who thinks that. This is one of the worst specials, and in my opinion, the worst episode of season 5. And that is why it marks my number 9 spot. Coming in at my number 8, we have one of the worst season 8 episodes to talk about. Coming in at my number 8 is Demolition Doofus.
So this episode basically shows SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff at their absolute worst.
So after another another incident, SpongeBob ends up getting Mrs. Puff deflated, meaning that she can no longer pop.
Yeah, and SpongeBob immediately decides to start cracking little jokes at the fact that he basically crippled Mrs. Puff for life.
I guess we'll have to call you Mrs. Pop.
SpongeBob, that's not funny, SpongeBob.
Yep, and Mr. Puff is rightfully angry about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in return, Mrs. Puff gets the idea to try to get SpongeBob killed in a demolition derby.
Yeah, and this episode literally feels like a creepypasta that was made into an entire episode. Like, it's the one where it's the kind of creepypasta where a character tries to get another character killed with hyper realistic eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course, because of her luck, SpongeBob ends up winning the derby, leaving Mrs. Puff. Why are you still alive?
That's literally an admission that Mrs. Puff won SpongeBob killed for real.
Which leads to Mrs. Puff, trying to kill SpongeBob herself.
Right.
And the worst part of it all, Mrs. Puff doesn't even get in trouble for this.
And of all episodes, for Mrs. Puff to not get arrested, why did it have to be this one?
Mm-hmm. Right. She got arrested for all these other episodes. Why not here?
This would have been the one time she got arrested for a justified reason.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, in this episode, SpongeBob is not very good. SpongeBob is very bad as well, because he literally does not care about the fact that Mrs. Puff is crippled thanks to him.
So yeah, if you expect me to sympathize, no, that's not happening. Like, which character in this episode is worse? The guy who crippled you, or the guy who tried to kill you?
That's very hard to choose from.
That's the equivalent to trying to compare Zeta Magenta to Fury of the Film Fan.
Right.
Yeah, Demolition Doofus is the worst episode of regards to the boating school episode, and that's why it's comfortably at number 8.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at number 7, we have one of the worst specials of the entire show. We have another one. Well, while we don't find Atlantis SquarePants is as bad as some others made it out to be, which is why it's not even on the list, I think we can all agree Truth or Square is flat out garbage trash.
One of the
This
biggest.
this episode
lie.
this episode is a blatant lie.
Mm-hmm.
SpongeBob and it's time I told you the Krabby Patty formula. All this and more will be answered in Truth or Square. Lies,
Mhm.
lies. When will the lies end? Lies. You promised us Krabby the Clown, but all we got was Cheapy the Cheapskate.
Accurate.
Yeah, this episode is just like this episode gets a special honor for being the biggest ratings traps in the show's history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this episode. Apparently, I think that this episode was trying to be a parody of those ratings traps, but you can't be a parody if you're committing to being a bunch of lies.
Yeah, so let's start with the SpongeBob plot. It's just watching a bunch of flashbacks that never happened in the show.
Yeah, as Pie Guy Rules said, the episode would have been much better if they showed they showed clips from older episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead,
Like,
we're watching.
If the Truth or Square video game was able to pull this off better, even though I do find that game a lot weaker than the movie game and Battle for Bikini Bottom, you have a problem.
Right.
Yeah, that's not even just to mention gimmicks they tried with the new animations in like the whole seriously though like particularly the one where they try to parody those 50s commercials.
Yeah, the whole KRB TTY BATTY. Like Adobe Flash did not exist back then.
Yeah, and of course all of them serve as nothing but filler.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the worst part about this particular episode. No. You know who we get more to see throughout this entire thing?
Patchy the Pirate.
Yes. Like
Patchy,
I'm
the Patchy segments in particular have been kind of hit or miss over the years. The Christmas Who one was good. The one in Shanghai was not very good. The one in SpongeBob's House Party was all right. The one in SpongeBob's BC was great, and the one in Friend or Foe was also great. But
and of course the Sponge Who Could Fly, which actually has some of my favorite Patchy segments. Actually,
Yeah,
the best part of a week episode.
Yeah.
And but the ones after Friend or Foe were just not good. Like the only one, the ones that after Friend or Foe for a while were not good. Like they didn't start getting good again until It's a SpongeBob Christmas.
Right.
Yeah, but
the one in Atlantis SquarePants was just strange, and no joke actually scared me as a kid. And of course the one in Truth or Square is the worst of them all.
Because here's a bit of a fun fact for you. Anytime Nickelodeon airs this particular TV movie, they have to edit out a good majority of Patchy segments, which includes Ricky Gervais' narration here too.
Yeah, because whenever the episode airs on TV, they skip straight over to the part where Patchy is starting his the SpongeBob anniversary special before going out to find SpongeBob.
Yeah, and the entire Patchy plot is Patchy thinking that SpongeBob is real.
Yeah, even though, to be fair, Patchy thought that SpongeBob was real in a lot of other episodes before this one, but he goes overboard here. Like, sure, SpongeBob, sure, we do find out that SpongeBob actually does exist in Patchy's universe, but this is just insane. And also, Patchy being SpongeBob's biggest fan is false because SpongeBob does not have a boat.
Right.
Yeah. And that's not even getting to mention how unlikable he is here, too. Like, he straight up kidnaps Robin Williams. Yes, the Robin.
And not to mention the entire special just has a negative feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can tell nobody wanted to be here. Like, seriously though, Will is just wasted.
And yes, Mr. Shelby, and this special did air on the same day as an infamous Nicktoon.
Wonder what
2009 2009 really was the downfall of Nickelodeon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fanboy and Chum Chum.
Right.
Not to mention either, a year after Fanboy and Chum Chum, we got Planet Sheen.
Yeah. And of course, this also has filler because the only joke I truly kind of got a chuckle out of was the different intros for the show.
Right.
And I did like the Scurvy song.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as the opening song in the, like, I'll admit, the opening theme song they did for this episode, for this special, was actually kind of good, actually.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's a shame that they didn't really use this intro anymore until the Legends of Bikini Bottom special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Truth or Square is a painful experience. That is basically a huge insult to SpongeBob fans who wanted a far better anniversary special.
I mean, at least we got SpongeBob's big birthday blowout, which is what this episode should have been like.
Right.
Yeah. If you watch a far better anniversary special show, wow. Meanwhile, this insult can stay as the 7th worst episode on the list.
Yeah.
Number 6. We're in hell, guys, because for the longest time, this was my episode of the entire show. If you have been with me for quite a while, this used to be my worst episode of the entire show for many years. It's only by stiff competition that it only ended up being at number 6 on the list. And yeah, if when Lily in the Book does not make my top 5 worst episodes of the series, you know we've really.
Yeah, this episode is definitely Squidward at his worst.
Mm-hmm.
I like to call this one the Attack of the Critics episode for me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. These are episodes like a lot of the critic addressing episodes of Teen Titans Go,
Destroy All Robots from Robot Boy, Fame and Misfortune from MLPFIM. I could go on.
Yeah, as this episode tries to make Squidward the asshole in here. So and because they're so tired of them getting the same criticism of Squidward getting abused, and they thought, what made Squidward torture episode work? Oh yeah, he has to deserve being punished. So they have to make it likable as possible. They made one mistake in doing that. Where's his sense of? Where's his reasoning?
Exactly, and not to mention either the episode, and if what we saw in Squid Baby was not bad enough, they decided to put in another gross out moment in this episode where apparently Patrick eats nothing but diapers in the Krusty Krab dumpster. Oh God, that's disgusting.
Yeah. So Squidward decides to read SpongeBob's diary in public, mind you, and they all get a laugh about his secrets and make him embarrass himself by using them. Yeah. Normally, SpongeBob can be a dick in episodes, but this was not one of them. Like, what did he do here to deserve this?
That's right, nothing. Like, the most that he really did was keep a bunch of customers waiting.
A lot of people try to defend this episode by saying, well, Squidward was trying to get back at SpongeBob after the years of torment. Here's the problem. It doesn't work because SpongeBob does not have a continuity. Whatever happens in a previous episode does not carry over to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument does not work. Because Squidward has no reason to do this to him.
And also, here's something that really gets me. How did SpongeBob not notice that Squidward was reading the diary much earlier than he actually did? Like he was walking around in front of Squidward this entire time, and he should have saw the diary in Squidward's hands.
Yeah. And of course, because Squidward finds out he's reading his diaper, it leaves him in tears, leaving the Bikini Bottomites to scold Squidward for his actions.
Even like SpongeBob, like in other episodes, whenever SpongeBob is mad at Squidward, he lets him know this. Like what SpongeBob could have done was take the diary out of Squidward's hands and basically storm off, leaving the other Bikini Bottomites to be angry at Squidward. But he just doesn't do that. Like we saw this in Can You Spare a Dime, where SpongeBob gets noticeably frustrated with Squidward.
Yeah, and that's not even getting to mention probably the biggest load of hypocrisy throughout the entire series. As everyone treats Squidward like a pariah for reading someone's diary, which would have been deserved if everyone else wasn't acting like a hypocrite about it.
Mm-hmm. Like earlier in the episode, this one guy goes all like, reading somebody else's diary. That's terrible. Tell me more. He knew that they knew that he was reading Squidward's diary, but yet they don't do anything about it.
Right, they were complicit.
Yeah, like seriously though, Squidward pretty much denied off a taxi. Not to mention, he gets his house repossessed.
Because of the crime of reading someone else's diary. Like forget Mr. Krabs stealing a bunch of pennies in an episode, and
forget about the SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward terrorizing Bikini Bottom with slide whistles. This is apparently the worst thing that you can do in Bikini Bottom besides littering.
And of course, which leads to a storm and a lightning rod electrocuting Squidward.
Right.
And because he's homeless, the police find out and decides to put him in a prison where he gets tomatoes thrown at him.
Yeah, and because the episode couldn't resist making Squidward more unlikable, when SpongeBob decides to come over and let Squidward know that that it was not his his personal diary, it was his work diary. Squidward decides to go ahead and read it, ending off the episode on a very sour note. And plus, here's something that I do need to say. If you don't want Squidward reading your diary, why did you bring it with you? That's just contrived writing.
And also published said work diary too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it was that embarrassing, why even put that stuff out to the public?
Like, that's a freaking plot hole. And of course, this episode decides to end with Squidward reading the diary, laughing, leaving SpongeBob in tears, and Squidward ends it with this freaking line: "I don't care. This was so worth it."
Worth losing your house? Really?
Yeah,
Squidward?
this episode was basically a confirmation that I can't see this as anything other than an episode that was solely made to attack the critics of the show prior.
I mean, after all, this episode came out in 2013, around the time when internet critics were basically getting onto the show.
Right.
Like, say what you want about the Patrick Star show that was basically just them using Doug Walker. At least that episode was funny.
This episode is not funny.
Like, the only part that redeeming quality this episode has is the chicken SpongeBob meme.
Right.
Yeah, although as we all know, memes don't make a good product, as we've seen with the Zelda CDI games.
Right.
Yep. And the fact that this was my worst episode of the entire series for a long time, and it's probably the second worst episode of a good cartoon, should tell you how bad the bottom 5 are going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
We have finally made it here, guys. The top 5. The worst of the worst.
The shit.
Because coming in at my number 5 is the worst standalone Squidward torture episode of the entire series. And this is the worst episode of season 6.
Choir
Choir
Boys.
Oh boy.
This episode has Family Guy levels of overly long gags.
So, you know, for every bad Squidward torture episode, most of you can make the argument that SpongeBob wasn't really fully conscious of what he was doing. We can't throw the fence here.
Yeah, SpongeBob knows that he's torturing Squidward, and he doesn't care.
Yeah, and of course, and to throw in another slap in the face, SpongeBob ends up coming out on top, stealing Squidward's dreams to be in the choir practice, and he becomes the lead singer.
Yeah, like this episode is set up like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but the difference there is that in Bugs Bunny cartoons, the reason why Bugs deserves to come out on top is because either Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam wants to kill Bugs Bunny.
Right.
And of course, this episode's both infuriating and boring.
Yeah, most of the episode is comprised of Squidward going all like Figaro, and then coughing and trying to clear his throat.
Right.
Like, and of course, there's this unfunny joke about SpongeBob being a police officer. And of course, and that's not even getting to the worst line in the whole episode, where SpongeBob at the landing Squidward and Jellyfish fields, and he says this line. My God. Ooh, what a lucky break. Now I have a captive audience.
Oh boy.
Oh God. SpongeBob knows that Squidward is being tortured by jellyfish.
And we're watching him scream while trying to recite his stupid song.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably the worst alone Squidward torture episode of the entire series. Give it I said the worst.
Oh, and on top of that, season 6 was the season of very gross shots. There's a shot where Squidward has his arm being really grotesquely pimpled, and we see the big pulsating vein over all the pimples.
Yeah, Choir Boys is the worst Squidward torture episode, or at least the worst individual one, which is why it lands comfortably in the top 5.
Yeah.
Number 4, you knew this episode was going to be on here. Because no worst SpongeBob episode list would be complete without this episode to make the list. One horse
meal.
Oh man. The only good part was the opening and the part like when Plankton back into the freezer, George Pearl didn't point out, did he just walk into the freezer and then he just walked out as well, don't say anything.
I also like the food fight at the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
That part was entertaining, but it goes right downhill as soon as Pearl enters the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So
out of every single episode in the entire series that they could have banned, the episodes that they decided to choose are the following: midlife crustacean for the panty raid scene, and also quarantine crabs because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But yet they decided not to ban either this episode or Are You Happy Now?
Right.
So Mr. Krabs finds out that Plankton is afraid of whales.
Which, first of
So
all,
what
that
the-
does not make sense. I mean, because
in
regardless
season
of SpongeBob's continuity, you've seen Plankton interact with Pearl before. Like most notably the episode, The Algae is Always Greener, where he slapped lives with Mr. Krabs. He interacted with Pearl.
Yeah,
Also-
and that's not even going to mention the fact that the Plankton even calls Pearl Mr. Krabs' daughter.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like it mentions, she's as big as a whale. Also, another thing is this: Pearl is a sperm whale. Sperm whales don't eat plankton; they eat squid and fish. Or I think they eat squid for sure.
Yeah, and like another thing to point out with this episode is that the episodes after One Course Meal basically ignores this episode for the most part. There was the episode Pat Nocchio where Plankton wasn't even bothered by the fact that he was inside a whale's mouth.
Right. Or the episode Jailbreak, I believe Plankton's Jailbreak or something. But he where he interacted with the whale inmate.
And honestly, I think that it's a good thing that this episode was ignored, because this episode is definitely Arnold betrays Iggy, and everyone knows its bendy levels of basically nobody liking the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mr. Krabs decides to try to act as troll by trying to scare Plankton. And as we see, Karen doesn't care.
Mm-hmm. What a bitch.
And of course, it establishes that it was 2 weeks of Plankton being tormented.
And another thing to and what makes this episode even more odd is that how did Plankton not notice that it was Mr. Krabs this entire time? Because he's wearing a whale costume. He's not actually a whale.
Mm-hmm.
And not even to mention, there's a plot like, how was Krabs even able to make a perfect whale suit? And yet later on in the episode, that whale seems to like literally not even be well made.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, if you're gonna be poorly written, can you at least keep your visuals consistent?
Right.
Yeah, at this time, the visuals in SpongeBob around that time were not really bad. But they were very inconsistent, as well as stiff.
And of course, Plankton has a nightmare where he gets stalked by Pearl, which, mind you, apparently according to this episode, whales apparently ate Plankton's family.
Even though we've literally saw them in Plankton's army.
Right.
And of course, this leads to Plankton breaking down crying.
Right. And him attempting suicide. And was not the kind in season 2 in that episode where SpongeBob Shrink Everyone, where Squid, after Patrick was given his whole Wumbo speech, Squidward was like, I wonder if a height like this could kill me. We knew he wasn't going to do it. He was just annoyed. Or that other gag in Dunces and Dragons where we knew he was not going to kill himself.
There have been Nickelodeon episodes, past, present, and probably the future, that have been banned from circulation, but they allowed this episode and Are You Happy Now to air. The same network that banned an episode of Rocko's Modern Life because of the adult jokes that it had, as well as another episode for featuring the devil, even though the devil was in other episodes of the series, as well as certain Ren and Stimpy episodes for being too dark, as well and plenty of other episodes that I can't name off the top of my head, and even episodes that aren't even controversial but the creators hated, like Arnold Betrays Iggy, which barely airs, or It's a Wishful Life, which also barely airs. They decided to let this and Are You Happy Now still air?
Nickelodeon, am I right? That's everyone's favorite children's network.
Yeah, of course. After Quiet on Set, there's some other stuff about them.
Yeah. So yeah, the only defense you can make for this episode is that in season 7, in the episode The Great Patty Caper, Plankton does get run over by a bus.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still alive. We've seen Plankton get stomped, kicked all across the series. So the chances of him being killed are slim to none.
Yeah, and like this episode, this episode apparently had a creepypasta where apparently Plankton was run over by a bus and he basically gets sent to heck. But and that version, that creepypasta is apparently fake, but it seems in line for this episode because no joke, this episode actually scared me when I was little.
And of course, so SpongeBob ends up saying he can't step on Plankton because it goes against his quote unquote good nature.
Considering what SpongeBob has done in episodes like A Pal for Gary, as well as Demolition Doofus, and
Good Neighbors,
and good Neighbors, and Choir Boys, yeah, you don't have good nature, SpongeBob.
mm-hmm.
So SpongeBob tries to break the news to Mr. Krabs that Plankton is about to commit suicide. But you want to know what his reaction to all this is?
He's a mess.
Dude, that's so low.
Yeah.
So should we have Mr. Krabs kill some cats, or have him burn down an orphanage? Because that's only second to making fun of someone who you decide is probably one of the most evil things you can do as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that description is exactly what Peluchin Entertainment did.
How he is not in jail, I will never know. I don't care that he was 15 when he did that. He killed animals.
I feel so bad for that cat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And by the episodes, and Miss SpongeBob ends up revealing that it was actually Mr. Krabs in a whale suit. Plankton gets to try to get some revenge on him. You want to know what his revenge is? Mine. That's Krabs' fear. You know, this episode ended. I know that this comes off as a bit because they should have just used his money but if the episode just ended with Mr. Krabs getting back at Mr. Krabs all the episode, it was still having a bad episode, but it wouldn't have gone. But it would have been less awful.
Right.
But these bad episodes always find that one extra minute to slap you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I'll be right back. I gotta use the restroom.
The number of the beat.
So yeah. So it was all turned out that SpongeBob set the projector of whales in order to scare off Plankton, with Mr. Krabs saying that he quote unquote redeemed himself.
Bullshit.
There's a reason why this is the most hated episode of the year by everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from one other episode, season 7, yeah, this isn't even the worst season 7 episode in my opinion. But you'll see that one in the top 2.
Right.
But this is a very strong contender, and it deserves every bit of hate it gets. And that is why One Course Meal is the worst episode of the series. We're in the top 3 now.
Oh,
We're almost there. Hold on, Trinity. Coming in at my number 3, we have the worst episode that is both a Patrick the Prick episode and the worst episode. This episode is in both categories. Because my number 3 is Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom. or as I like to call it, the ultimate Patrick's and the worst and the ultimate Squidward torture episode.
Mm-hmm.
As this episode, Squidward wants to go to a Kelpie G concert, but Patrick decides to eat Squidward's ticket. So, and with very little time, the episode states that Squidward will not get that ticket by showtime, which implies that Patrick probably shit the ticket out.
Ugh.
Oh God. And this moment and the one of the stupidest moments of the entire series is when Patrick basically goes up on stage and tries to go all like, I would like a extra cheesy nacho with a side of cheese, like it's a fast food restaurant. Like, no, it's not.
Yeah, Patrick is beyond horror here.
Yeah,
Nowhere
like Patrick was stupid in other episodes before this one, but in this episode he literally eats random objects for no reason.
Yeah, and I'd ask how Patrick was able to enter the concert, but we all know that Patrick most likely shit the ticket out.
Ugh.
And of course, Patrick does not care about neither Squidward or even SpongeBob's feelings because both their backstage passes. I'd like to also guess how he was able to enter the backstage pass, but unless it's the obvious one or they did an X-ray on him, I'm questioning that too. And of course, Patrick literally basically getting hated for disrupting their concert. He pretty much gets carried over in praise.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is wrong with these people?
And you may be wondering, how is this the worst Squidward torture episode? What did Squidward do wrong in this episode?
He selfishly didn't want SpongeBob to come with him to the concert. Like, really? That's your only explanation? Like Squidward is not obligated to follow SpongeBob's own feelings.
And of course, this episode, we have to watch Squidward put up with being humiliated by an annoying SpongeBob and an insufferable Patrick, to the point where he tries to beg that he wants to see Kelpie G, but they did have backstage passes. So to end it on a sour note, SpongeBob, Kelpie G, that SpongeBob can play the freaking ukulele, and he invites him to be with him, leaving Squidward in the dust.
Honestly, if you want to watch a much better episode with this kind of thing, watch Hello Bikini Bottom. That episode is much better because that was basically an episode that involves SpongeBob and Squidward basically being in a band, and it basically had SpongeBob and Squidward having a good time together. But this episode is definitely worth the skip.
Not to mention, season 12 actually did this kind of plot much better in Krusty Krishna's.
Yeah, they did.
At least that one gave Squidward a happy ending.
And the sister episode that it's paired up with is actually a showcase that the show can have moments where it can be silent for a while, because that episode is entirely silent.
This episode is the worst of both worlds. I can't think of how anyone thought this was a good idea. We're almost there. We're only at we're about to get to number 2. Number 2. You knew that this episode would be on here. Number 2 is A Pal for Gary.
Oh man!
Oh god! This episode is basically another episode where SpongeBob is at his worst.
If not his absolute worst.
Yep.
How do we summarize this episode? SpongeBob is probably the most neglectful owner in history.
Yeah, he the only part of this episode that I actually do like is the parts where SpongeBob is genuinely worried about Gary, but that's really about it.
This episode was just infuriating.
Left for Dead.
So, yes. SpongeBob decides to get a new playmate for Gary. Because SpongeBob decides to literally steal one of them and not heed the lady's warning to not have the Nuda branch be next to other pets. He just takes it and goes.
To quote Mr. Enter, what the fuck is a Nuda branch? And then a picture of a real life Nuda branch is basically shown. Which, by the way, the picture that we see is not what a Nuda branch is like in the episode of SpongeBob.
And as we enter Puffy fucking Fluffy.
Yeah.
More like Savage Ravage.
Puffy Fluffy's design is just horrifying.
And Puffy Fluffy takes all his joy in torturing Gary. And not once does SpongeBob even notice it. Instead, he chooses to hold Gary every time.
He literally thought that Gary was the one who made all of that mess, even though he really wasn't. And plus, SpongeBob has gotten other pets before this point. Like we know about Jellyfish Jam, where Gary was not jealous of the other jellyfish. The jellyfish ended up taking over his house.
Right.
And as we enter the dawn of night, where Gary has to fight back against Puffy Fluffy, Puffy Fluffy turned into a monster. So in the morning, we find out that the entire house is a wreck. So he decides to figure out what is going on, only to find out that quote Gary is in quote big trouble because he's quote unquote jealous about Puffy Fluffy, which has quite possibly the worst moment in the entire series to date. Three, 2, 1.
The worst episode ever. Now your worst episode.
Yeah, like 3, 2, 1. The worst moment in the entire series.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Here's the comment highlighted. But anyways, the worst moment in the entire series is when he's in Puffy Fluffy's, when Gary is in Puffy Fluffy's mouth. He basically uses to scold and blame Gary.
Oh boy.
Oh God.
Who here was sent in a fit of rage after watching that scene?
I'm pretty sure that several TVs were thrown out the window the day that this aired.
How do you see Gary suffering? He's in Puffy's mouth. He basically says, "You put Puffy Fluffy down right now. Bad boy, Gary. Bad boy."
Gary's about to be eaten, you moron!
Yeah, he's about to be eaten. How do you not see that he's about to be eaten? How do you see that as him holding on to him?
So, and because Puffy Fluffy decides to drop Gary and instead tries to eat SpongeBob, he still scolds Gary for it. While Gary was trying to save his life.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredibly horrible for SpongeBob to do.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I will say about this episode, though, is that the show Family Dog, which I also did a review on, is basically this episode and Pet Sitter Pat as an entire series.
And Gary finally saved SpongeBob's life. So you would think he'd be the tiniest bit grateful, but no, he ends it with two things. One thing, what do you have to say for yourself? Two, basically take away Gary's free time and makes him go to the Krusty Krab with him, removing all of the free time he had.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hey there, guys.
Hello.
I just got back from my John Wick Rocks and His Buddies episode.
I see.
All right.
Oh, man.
All right. Yeah, we're at number 2.
Yeah. I need to get off topic for just a second. Have you heard of the drama surrounding Felix?
A little bit, yes.
I'm in the dark a bit.
All right. Let's go ahead and get back on topic.
Okay.
All right. So this episode is basically what Jen reviews character assassination.
Yep. He said it best.
Uh-huh.
And yes, episode 3 of Toon Discussions will be SpongeBob SquarePants. If you'd like to tune in, let me know. If you'd like to join in the discussion, let me know.
Yeah. This episode might be the worst episode involving a character getting tortured, because I can't fathom how this episode got greenlit.
Like
Same
Gary, Gary, and you know, this is honestly worse than most Squidward torture episodes, because Squidward can talk, Gary cannot talk, so he's not able to defend himself very well.
Also, Gary is a pet.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually makes it worse, because Gary didn't even do anything to deserve it. And to think this disgrace of an episode is not the worst one. We have made it here, folks. The worst episode of the series.
Let me
It's
guess.
to end it all.
Is it one course meal?
Nope, we
We already discussed
Is it
because-
Pet Sitter
and-
Pat?
already discussed it. I did say earlier on that 3 specials have made the top 10 worst. So it was no other episode that you could have guessed. 3, 2, 1. SpongeBob, you're fired.
Oh
This
my God.
this episode is basically the bottom of the barrel of creativity. Like nothing in this episode is fresh at all.
No. Like, SpongeBob literally gets fired because Mr. Krabs wants to save a quarter.
Or actually a nickel.
SpongeBob got fired because Mr. Krabs wants to save a fucking nickel.
Mr. Krabs, you have better reasons to fire SpongeBob than 5 cents.
And like nothing in this episode is original at all. The title of the episode it rips off Mrs. Puff, You're Fired. This kind of conflict has happened in the show before. Mr. Krabs sold SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents. Mr. Krabs and Squidward got into an argument over a dime. SpongeBob has been shown to not be able to make anything other than Krabby Patties. SpongeBob has been fired from the Krusty Krab before. He's been let go from a job, and so much more. Like this episode does not have an original bone in its body.
This episode rips every single episode you can think of, from Model Sponge to A Day Without Tears to The Big Switch to Mrs. Puff, You're Fired to Can You Spare a Dime to Karate Choppers. Any episode you can think of there is nothing original you can see in here.
And anything that is original to this episode is just nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like that episode of Seinfeld where they basically say they basically come up with the show about nothing. That describes this episode in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens.
And that's not even to mention the length that this episode calls a story, because there is so much filler.
Exactly.
Let's see here. There's the part where SpongeBob cries for a good minute.
There's also the stupid joke where SpongeBob tries to say the word fired, but it ends up but it ends up making Patrick say other random stuff, and only to answer with, "I can't think of other words that start with the letter C, SpongeBob."
There's also the part where SpongeBob goes to restaurant after restaurant after restaurant with the exact same results each and every single time.
Which all he is Krabby Patties.
Gee, we haven't seen. Where have we seen that before? I mean, it's not like we've seen this happen in an episode like Le Big Switch or anything.
Right.
And that's not it. And of course, and there's also other instances of filler. Like how are the restaurants able to be satisfied with the customer's results? The same people who fired SpongeBob. And of course, there's also SpongeBob making snail food for Gig. It somehow stuck at all the other restaurants he was supposed to work at.
Even though that's completely inconsistent, because if SpongeBob was able to make snail food, why couldn't he have made any other food besides Krabby Patties at those other restaurants?
And let's talk about character. Mr. Krabs, for the love of God, I hope Krusty Krab gets shut down.
Me too.
Yeah.
He fires SpongeBob over a nickel. And of course, because we know how these kinds of episodes go, it's no shock that the Krusty Krab is back.
Surprise of all surprises, the Krusty Krab was horribly run without SpongeBob.
And also, to point this out, Mr. Krabs claims that he's able to cook food, yet he couldn't even cook cheese.
Right.
Yeah,
Here's that chef on the SS diarrhea.
exactly. And imagine if in the SpongeBob movie, the reason as to why SpongeBob doesn't get the job as the manager of the Krusty
Alright,
Krab
after you
2
finish
was
this
because
episode, I do need to show you something.
imagine if in the SpongeBob movie, the reason why SpongeBob wasn't put in charge of the Krusty Krab 2 was because it's what saved me a hey penny. Arr, 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 arr.
Look at this. I
Hypocrite.
Yeah, I do
You
need to get
guys
off
do-
topic for just a
The
second.
hypocrisy is strong in this one.
You guys don't think it's unhealthy to spend so much time talking about other people, and yet you don't think that it's unhealthy to spend most of your time stalking Razor X?
Yeah, Fury's been stalking me too.
As well as
You
me.
never learn.
Anyways, back to the episode. And of course, there's also the whole fun employment shit.
Apparently the episode actually got controversy because of this part.
Yeah, especially by Fox News. This episode implies that the only thing that ever defined SpongeBob was his job.
Even though he loved doing jellyfishing, as well as had a thing for karate. And also he loves his pet snail Gary. Like, making Krabby Patties at the Krusty Krab is not the only part of SpongeBob's identity.
Exactly.
And the fun employment can also be filler. And of course, we get to Sandy's contribution to the episode, which has her literally feeding toxic waste to a bunch of jobless and homeless fish.
That is just awful.
And of course, because she was able to stop SpongeBob from eating that radiant ended up giving one fish an allergic reaction and gave Patrick a mutant head. Which is the episode that I actually kind of chuckled at.
But the
What do you think I'm pulling for you, Luso? Yeah.
Yeah, and the ironic part about all of this is this was the episode that actually closed out the post movie era of SpongeBob. Even though this episode was not aired last, like the last episode aired before the second movie came out was Kenny the Cat, but this episode was actually aired during Veterans Day back in November of 2013, but this was technically the end of the post movie era.
What a horrible way to end it.
Indeed.
And I think we can close all our thoughts on SpongeBob You're Fired with this is the worst episode, and why it's at number one is because it contained every single problem that a bad SpongeBob episode can have.
Exactly.
The episode does not have an original bone in its body.
Yeah, it's flat out boring. It doesn't even attempt to fill time, and instead expects filler. It rips off every other episode known to man. It has Krabs at his worst. It gives unfortunate implications to SpongeBob's character, which leads to some very awful morals for this episode to have, unintentionally, though. The episode is predictable from start to finish. And by all accounts, this is the biggest example of a ratings trap.
Like with Truth or Square, you could see the potential in that. Like this episode is literally this episode. You know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that's not even. And of course, Krabs does not even learn his lesson. So he instead decides to put a paid toilet, so we can add characters that don't learn the lessons as part of this episode's list of problems.
Yeah, and what makes this episode worse is that Nickelodeon had been hyping this episode up for literal months. Like, I remember back in the summer of 2013, they basically teased this episode, but apparently they lied about the contents of the episode.
So
False advertising.
So yeah, to the viewer as well. I can't think of any other episode that is more creatively dead and bankrupt than SpongeBob Fired. Every other episode, even the worst ones, at least they had even a monochrome of effort put into them. This one had no effort whatsoever. And
Like
if this was
this is only one step above literally showing a jar of mayonnaise for 22 minutes and expecting people to enjoy it because it has SpongeBob on it.
Because, and at least with every other episode, at least they attempted to have a bit of substance for them. At least they stand out bad. They stand out for different reasons. This episode is the amalgamation of everything wrong of the worst qualities of this series. And we have no problem calling SpongeBob You're Fired the absolute bottom of the barrel #1 worst episode of the series.
And like I'm glad that Steven Hillenburg came back to the show after this particular episode because there could have been signs that the show would have continued to decrease after this episode, because this episode basically does nothing for most of its episode and expects its viewers to watch because, hey, it has SpongeBob on it. We can do anything with it no matter what. But the show actually got better after this episode.
Yeah, thank God.
And meanwhile, everyone saw right through this episode as a pathetic ratings trap.
Yep. And by the way, this will be my profile pic for June 2nd.
Nice.
All right. So yeah, SpongeBob You're Fired can burn in hell with everything inside it. And that is why SpongeBob You're Fired is the worst of the worst. And with that, we're done.
I'm going to go ahead and eat dinner.
All right.
All right. Hope you enjoyed these 3 hours of torment.
Yeah, it's a good thing that the show ended up getting better after SpongeBob You're Fired, because of the fact that if the show ended up ended up continuing to decrease after this particular episode, I don't know where the show would be right now.
And with
Yeah.
that, we finally closed up the chapter of the bad episodes. And maybe something in the future we might do a best of list. Oh, that one's a bit harder
Right.
to narrow it down because of how many fantastic episodes to talk about. Like, if we wanted to, we could have done a top 50.
Right.
But anyways, thank you for watching this particular stream. Hope you all enjoyed yourselves. And stay tuned in June when we talk about the movies of May that we watched.
All right.
Yeah. I recently watched the Lilo and Stitch remake, and it's very bad.
And
I
with that,
heard what they did with the ending.
The ending is literally the ending of Ralph Breaks the Internet and Toy Story 4, but for Lilo and Stitch.
Yep. So, anyways, see you next time. Bye.
I see your comment, Mr. Chilbian.
Yep. Anyways, have a good night, everyone. Stay safe.